According to Reuters, the U.S. is considering new sanctions against China to stop the country from invading Taiwan. The Biden administration is also focused on getting other countries to follow, especially partners in Asia and Europe. But the U.S. could have a hard time getting support due to China's central role in the global economy. Craig Singleton joins me now for more. He's a senior fellow with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, where he analyzes great power competition with China. So, Craig, exactly what we need to talk about at the moment. First of all, in the sanctions world, are there often sanctions that happen before something takes place? Obviously, after Ukraine was invaded, sanctions snapped down on Russia. But how would it work to have sanctions before China does anything in Taiwan?
Thanks, John. I mean, the simple answer is we don't know. It's taken several months, but policymakers here in the United States are just now starting to understand even how sanctions are impacting Russia's economy. And while there's no shortage of lessons to be learned, I think, from the Russia sanctions rollout, I think U.S. officials rightly recognize that some of the tools that were used against Moscow might not be replicable in the event that China does decide to invade Taiwan. And that stark reality is forcing, I'd say, U.S. and European officials back to the drawing board as they evaluate options to see whether they can deter China's increasing belligerence against the self-governing island nation.
So help me think through some of the reasons it wouldn't be so effective. One, I guess, would certainly be that China has a big economy that is connected to everybody.
Absolutely. I mean, one key difference between the Russia and the China examples is that there is extensive economic entanglement between the U.S. and China, and actions taken against China would no doubt seriously impact the U.S. economy at a time when it's facing pretty considerable headwinds. And part of that is actually by Beijing's design. China's evolving model of state capitalism, it recognizes that China's great power ambitions hinge in part on technological and structural interdependence with the West. And one of the goals of that campaign is actually to constrain Washington's ability to respond to a crisis scenario in Taiwan.
And is that true then also with relations with European countries? So essentially thickening economic ties so that when the time comes, these countries just won't be able to handle the economic pain of imposing sanctions.
I mean, to some extent, yes. I mean, I think it's important that we recognize that the threat of sanctions failed to deter Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So there is something of a Goldilocks conundrum here, right? You have to devise an options list that's not too hot, but not too cold, and ideally one that inserts serious doubt into China's decision-making calculus. Lots of countries are going to be very reluctant to enact sanctions against China because it will seriously damage their own economies. And while the sanctions regime against Russia was largely a transatlantic affair, to your point earlier, sanctions against China would not only involve buy-in from our transatlantic partners in Europe in particular, but all across Asia Pacific, where most of these countries are financially and economically reliant on Beijing. So there really are no easy answers.
Is there any way that the U.S. could sort of flipping the script here, forget about sanctions for a moment. Is there any way that closer ties with China, if that's even possible, would create a situation where China would be deterred from moving on Taiwan because of the closeness of those ties?
I think there's some logic to that argument, and it primarily is predicated upon the idea that is there value in having the Chinese reliant on U.S. supply chains or certain types of U.S. technology such that they don't decide to invest more heavily in those industries or perhaps feel that they can engage in aggressive or belligerent action because they are so reliant on us? I think overall, I would say the U.S. is really well positioned to use sanctions as well as strategic trade and export controls to potentially shape China's action. Everything on the table from blacklisting specific Chinese entities and individuals, in essence, blocking them from the dollarized economy, or prohibiting Chinese entities from U.S. export transactions via denial orders. The U.S. could even do something called a foreign direct product rule against key Chinese industries associated with that war effort. And the goal would be to bar foreign produced items from even being transported to China. And that's really just for starters. There really is a whole suite of options available. The question is, how much pain will the United States and its allies sort of incur? And that's where US policymakers and I think European allies are really just at the start of that conversation.
That's right. All right, Craig Singleton, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks.